there's content that's borderline, that's content that we basically will not.
There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset.
I respect you, and I have a great deal of appreciation to you, JF.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to JFGT tonight. We are talking about a subject that fascinates me, the documentary by Mike Klum about EDP 445, another story of a YouTuber that became a fat loser, and in this case, who has been canceled for interaction with minors. Fascinating. Mike Klum is a genius. Mike Klum tells stories in a way that we used to have in some of the best documentaries between the 60s and 2020, maybe 2000, year 2000. So there was this whole strand of documentaries that were powerful. They were making a mythology out of reality rather than just because a documentary, people are often mistaken that it's kind of a journalistic report, when in fact it's more like a work of art that transfers something that is real into a mythology, into a quasi-fiction. That is what the best documentaries do. My favorite documentary on this line is Pour la suite du monde, For What's to Come, a Quebec documentary from the 60s by Pierre Perrault. And there is almost no one doing this anymore, because making a movie like this is like, it's going to give you 1 hour, 30 minutes of content in a super spammed public space where people are consuming content like it's nothing. And it takes you two years of your life to make a good movie like this. And it's almost like the market is almost excluding this at this point. But there are guys like Mike Klum who appear to have understood the art and who want to continue in the line of great movies. And I think those things will survive the test of time. I think in 1,000 years, probably no one will know who Gideon is or who Alex Rosen is. But in 1,000 years, someone might know who Mike Klum is. In the same way we know about Homer, you know. I think he's going to be a kind of one of the great Greek mythologists of the future, known from our time. So welcome to X. We will be streaming exclusively on X tonight because the subject is too touchy for YouTube, and we already have the film itself has been canceled or just blocked or warned. I don't know if it's still available, but there's a warning maybe on it. So it cuts the reach, and so I'm not going to do my live stream on YouTube tonight if it's to have my live stream cut out of reach. I'd rather start exploring this new format of the live streaming on X, because of course live streaming on X has been available for a long time, but it's been a relatively new thing. They have a new dashboard for controls. I can now see live viewers. I can see new graphs. So perhaps there's a future for live streaming on X. We'll see if our crowd is able to follow us here. Of course, I see that the chat is much less active than a YouTube, but that is what I have to do given the subject. So I commented during the night as I finished watching the documentary. So EDP 445 is this fat black YouTuber who rose to fame instantly, who is an incel, who got kind of folded in by the system, but who, you know, people rise to celebrity so much that the mainstream system fails to test these guys. Think about, for example, someone like me. The mainstream system rejects me. and they've set up their ways of cancel culture by using Wikipedia, by using mainstream newspapers appearances to say this guy is evil, this guy is bad, this guy is this or that. But when you are in the system of fame rising on YouTube in modern times, the system doesn't have the time. The cancel culture, the Me Too stuff doesn't have the time to catch up. And they let pass some people like EDP445, who down the line is kind of not really a conservative, but a kind of incel, Donald Trump, Andrew Tate revolving type of guy ideologically, but no one would have known, since the current setup for creation on YouTube is people say stupid stuff and they just yell at the camera and they entertain. They don't really share deep political thoughts. So here's a guy who got propped up, but who probably the left and the mainstream system that would have wanted to cancel him in advance didn't really get a chance. And anyways, he's a fat black guy who's meaningless politically, so why would they attack him? Huawei is on the chat. He says JF isn't a bad guy. Yes, exactly. So I commented on the Mike Klum documentary about him because the whole documentary is built around the premise of, well, here's a guy who got caught being a pedo because he contacted a 13-year-old and then interacted with a 15-year-old that was soon transitioning to becoming 16. And that makes him, either you want to call it ebiphilia or pedo, and he's evil, and here's a documentary about him. That is kind of the premise with which you enter this movie, but this movie is about so many other things that it's truly a great work of art. I said the big thing you will hear about this documentary is that it's a documentary about a pedo YouTuber. It is indeed about a YouTuber who appears to have committed crimes that I do not condone, but it's so much more. It's about the new clowns who have turned pedo hunting into a spectacle without actually caring about catching real pedos. It's about the psychology profession that is slowly preparing to classify any woman below 28 as not fully developed, and in the process attempt to sterilize a civilization. It's about a YouTuber burning the candle of life quick. It's about young women using their sex and abusing men to rise to fame. It's about the parasitic state of society where incompetent pedo hunters use decoys who then betray them to achieve even more fame. It's about how this world will digest you and shit you out because people need a villain, and some unhinged motherfucker always shows up with nothing to lose, ready to take the job. It's about how our societies are cruelly keeping people alive that in any other natural circumstances would already be dead. It's about incelism, defeat, the unavoidable void in which the crap of this world must swirl in and suffer through for absolutely no reason, just because that's how the world is. I have watched almost every movie worth watching in existence, with a particular focus on documentaries. There's still nothing like a Mike Klum documentary. The setting up of a modern mythology, the construction of entries into the film, the progression, the contrast between grace and pathetism. To make a documentary, you have to understand reality and then build a fiction from it. 10 out of 10. So I'd like to go over why this documentary is important, why it's so well made, what makes good documentary making, what is the key to the art of Mike Klum. And by the way, let me know who we on the regular chat or other people. Let me know how the streaming works on Twitter. Are you guys receiving me good? Is there some hang-ups? It's hard for me to monitor the quality of the streaming, although I do seem to be live based by refreshing the video. Okay, there we are. Yes, it seems to be flowing. So let me know how you experience the streams, because at some point we might transfer to full-time X streaming if it becomes viable. There are still some problems. We can't hang out in the chat before the show begins. we can't have super chats. I don't think so. I don't think there's a super chat option. Is it because I'm a Canadian or is it X wide? I don't know, but we'll see if that's possible. So, the first thing about this movie is that the montage, the editing, the music is so powerful because there's been such a ruining of human attention in the last 20 years that we don't have any more people taking the time to do it well. But what has been happening over the last, I would say, 40 years of evolution of the documentary style is that it's been influenced a lot by journalistic TV. It's been influenced by cliffhangers. It's been influenced by movements. So a good documentary, you have movements that kind of penetrate deeper and just, it's like advancing literally in a pussy. And the movie of Might Clum just, it gets like this. It goes further and then it goes further and then it backs out and then goes further. There's like 6 parts that he designates explicitly. But one of the modern form that has taken the documentary world is that basically your documentary must be a succession of trailers. And that's because trailers have become so good. That's kind of a result of capitalism where people started making so much money selling tickets that ultimately it became all about the trailer. And so there is a whole art that has been developing in exciting people with a trailer. And the art of trailer has kind of surpassed the art of movies. And this has been the case for 30 years of ticket selling in cinema. But what we have seen as a trend is actually the art of the trailer is now moving back into the movie. So you watch the first 2 minutes of this movie, and it's like the trailer. Bing! Mike Clum seeds those bell rings that are so important to trailer rhythmicity. It starts a beam, and then a cowboy section where cowboy music starts, and attitude kind of shots start. And it's so beautiful, so well done. The intro tells you basically this is a documentary about a pedo. So here you're gonna have this guy. He's shameless about it. He just contacted these children, and so he's evil, and that's it. That's how the movie introduces itself. And for I would say 99% of the audience for this movie, that's the message they will get out from it. They will know that something else is happening in the movie, but it will be more unconscious. They'll be like, oh yeah, shit, wow, this guy is bad. This guy is evil. Then there's an idyllic music, and we enter what led to this guy, EDP 445. What led to the current state? So you have an idyllic music, and I will note this year, 2026, this is the first time AI reconstituted montages, like from modern AI, not the special effects of the past, but just modern AI remontages of imagined scenes are making it into an artistic documentary. This is the first time I see it. In a respectable documentary, we have AI montages of how the childhood of EDP 445 happened. So he was chilling with his sister, watching Monday Night Raw. He was a wrestling fan. Not much mentions of his mother and father. Seems like perhaps the father wasn't there at all. Mother was a smoker who's dead already. A heavy smoker. So there he is growing as a partner to his sister, and that's all they know about life. And they watch wrestling, and he falls in love with the Eagles. So he becomes an Eagle fans, which will be part of it, the big identity of the guy built into the documentary. And this is so important because Mike Clum seeds all of these Eagle references, and he's always with his Eagle flags and Eagle shirts, football shirts in his rooms as a kid. and eventually this will lead to the conclusion of the documentary, because a good documentary always rescues everything. A good documentary seeds all of the traces and then gives you a finale that is satisfiable, that is satisfying, even if it happens to a man that the documentary asks you to judge as evil. And then, Mike Klum uses this is, I'm still under emotional shock on this one, but Mike Klum builds a villain mythology for EDP 445. So EDP 445 is in interviews, and I want you to understand, when you do a documentary, you're stuck with all this footage, and it's just a fat guy on a chair telling you things. And so EDP was saying, without villains, you wouldn't have a storyline. The villain was more important than the fucking hero. So those are just thoughts that a YouTuber will share, an interviewee will share. And Mike Klum takes this and puts this into art, because he builds ultimately the documentary of this documentary makes you reflect about what is the function of villains. What is with all these normie YouTubers that are after him? They just rejoice in putting him down. They rejoice, oh, we caught the speedo, yeah! And they don't think about the system that they entertain by doing so. The Keemstar, other Oompaville, a couple of mainstream normie YouTubers who aren't thinking too deep about their contributions to the world. They gang on him like a high school bunch of girls, basically. And this guy is kind of signifying with this sentence and with the later montage, no, I'm a villain intentionally. I am the villain because there's demand for it, and there's no storyline without the villain. So Mike Klum goes very deep in this, making you reflect that, yeah, the villain is necessary. All of these little polite YouTubers out there that of course they will be shocked by pedo allegations, and of course they will go after him. But ultimately they have nothing if it's not of the villain. So EDP tells the story, and we have here the story of an incel building up. High school years. He has a girlfriend, Marta. She leads him on. She lets him hug her and holds hands, but she breaks off all of a sudden. And he says, low-key goes with another guy. So he is heartbroken. This was the only love in his life. And you have here Love Hurts playing. Mike Klum is so powerful in his music choice. Exactly the song to be had there. He's heartbroken. He's crying in his room with his eagle flags and shirts. And he says about women, that's when I understood about women. They will play you, they will fuck you over, and they won't think twice about it. So for her, it was just, maybe I'll give it a try. I'll hold his hand. For him, it was the end of his life. It was, I have everything, and now suddenly I have nothing. It shows you the whole asymmetry over which the males and females interact in the love relationship. Hui says JF is due to his regular appearance on the Alexandria Substack. We'll see. We'll see when I get there. So heartbroken, and they're from the heartbroken position of EDP 445 arises the full villain. And here Mike Klum develops a mythology of the kind like a villain born into the false stomachs of the Lord of the Ring, where they cultivate these orcs, and these orcs, they rip apart the stomach and they eat someone. This is so beautiful, and it goes on the Tchaikovsky background of Swan Lake. I mean, this music right here, this is the music of when you take ingredients in a fiction and you're kind of in your world, in your basement, just putting evil ingredients together to just change the world. Tchaikovsky, Swan Lake. Mike Klum goes with this, and then you understand what Mike Klum is trying to say. And it's beautiful how he never says anything explicitly. It's all in the montage. But it's like, yeah, this was the birth of EDP 445. So high school years, heartbroken, woman will just break your heart. And then I have all this vengeance. I have all this anger. I'm alone. I have no pussy. Fuck this. I will create. And then after masturbating to Pornhub, EDP goes to YouTube and starts an account, and he decides to call it Eat That Pussy, so EDP. And then he decides that seeing that his weight on the balance at this moment is 445 pounds, he decides to call himself EDP 445. And with the music in the background, it makes you realize something very real about YouTubing. It is the alchemy of anger. It is the building at the bottom of the world. Like, I've been slighted, I've been left behind, I've been abandoned. But nothing can stop me from making videos and yelling at the camera. And he rises to 4 million subscribers. So a modern YouTuber that has come after my years. I actually never knew about EDP 445. These other guys, these other YouTubers seem to be talking about him, covering the story. I never knew. I think I heard about him a couple of months ago, and it was about people trying to get me to denunciate him. And I'll get to what I think about him. But I think that at this point, the villain has illustrated a weakness of the system. Because I know how these systems work. These systems of social reinforcement that leads these normie YouTubers to all go after you at the same time. And I know that they can trigger on a falsehood, because it happened to me many times. I know that a bunch of YouTubers can start believing that you're a murderer. I know that they can start believing that you're a rapist. I know that they can gang up together and create false systems of belief for their audience. And so it's very important to know you can think that EDP 445 has committed a crime or would have committed a crime if it had been properly investigated. And yet you can still think that his villain attitude is highlighting a deep flaw of the system of social cancel culture, Me Too, sexual exploitation of men by women who try to elevate themselves into stars, and this whole pedo hunter business, which is not serious. And the documentary makes a good case about this using Chris Hansen. So here you have a EDP 445. The mythology is built, admiring villains from the time he was 5 years old, looking at Monday Night Raw, born from evil, anger, left behind by woman, by heartbreak. That is a beautiful entry, and it only gets better. So the predator poachers. So we're talking about Alex Rosen, and then we're talking about Gideon and Skeeter Jean, who are black. Kind of, they try to imitate Chris Hansen too. So they're in that business of these catching the predators, YouTubing. They play various roles in this documentary. So Alex Rosen is the guy who initially set up a false 13-year-old, so an imagined fictive 13-year-old, to contact EDP to try to get him into talking sexual with a 13-year-old. So this was following an original YouTuber who's a football fan. I didn't know there was this whole sphere of football fan YouTubing. So you have this YouTuber who starts seeing that EDP 445 is on all these Instagrams of 13, 14, 15-year-olds. and he's telling them that they're beautiful. Oh, you're beautiful. Okay, and so this original YouTuber says there's something wrong with this guy. Now, I will say on this, like, what the fuck are you doing on Instagram with sexy pictures at 13-year-olds? Because it's like, yeah, I want to morally condemn, and I absolutely do morally condemn approaching 13 years old for men. But what the fuck is a woman doing on Instagram? Basically showing herself a girl of 13-year-old. So there's something in this documentary that makes you reflect about the tension, because what we're essentially doing in modern society is we're allowing the full teasing of men to the extreme, and we're protecting all forms of teasing, and then we're trying to catch them on a technicality or on a single sentence that they've said here, and we have them on a record, and we have the whole, there's a surveillance state that has arisen not from the state. Amazingly, there's a surveillance state that has arisen from private interest in the domain of spectacle, of pedo poaching and pedo hunting. And that is scary. I mean, that would deserve a whole documentary on its own, but it kind of shows in the Mike Klum documentary. And it's like, well, so we're allowing women to squeeze their boobs. We're allowing 13 years old and 15 years old to squeeze their boobs on Instagram and show the cleavage. And then we're then trying to criminalize effectively through social cancel culture and Me Too. We're trying to criminalize men going to these and say, "Oh yeah, you're beautiful," but there's something incoherent and asymmetric here. I'm all for approaching 13 years old sexually to be considered illegal, sure, but why don't we talk about how a 13-year-old then does not belong in a sexy pose on Instagram? And that basically almost everything that she could do, in modern times with modern clothing is effectively sexy. And how other societies have understood this. And they basically wrapped women in bags. And I'm not saying that's the solution, but I'm saying our society has sinned in the other sense than wrapping women in bags. It has sinned to the extent that we are basically making private young women entrapment agents of a surveillance state that is greater than the state itself. And that is grave. That is grave, and it's a bad spot to be in for males today. He explains why he ended up talking to this fake 13-year-old, but this is what I want to point out. There is no real victim in this whole documentary. There is no child that has been penetrated by EDP 445. The closest thing to a victim, and we'll get to her, there's Kayla. But Kayla is a 15-year-old becoming a 16-year-old, and she's being sexually teasing toward him. And it's like, he doesn't have sex with her at 15 years old. He says, we can have sex once it will be legal. And there she is, sending sexy pics of herself to him. I mean, it's almost what I would answer to if I'm single and a 15-year-old or 16-year-old approaches me and says, I want to have sex with you. My answer would be the same as EDP 445. I can't right now, but once it's legal for you, we can meet in Vegas. Of course, I wouldn't meet in Vegas. I would meet somewhere else. But that is effectively the legal thing to do. And we are asked to this documentary, and I wouldn't say it's a sin of Mike Klum here. It's Mike Klum delivers a full pedo view of EDP 445, but it's a fictive one. Mike Klum has to invent a AI girl to make it look like there's a 13-year-old there speaking, but there's no 13-year-old speaking to EDP 445. It's all a bunch of predator poachers. So we're in the domain of entrapment, pre-crime, just creating the crime that wouldn't have happened for the purpose of catching someone. And we're on very dangerous grounds here. Very dangerous grounds. And the documentary doesn't moralize on any direction of it. In fact, I would say the documentary mostly cradles the normie into the, yeah, that's a pedo. We need to do something about it. Let's call the FBI. But at the same time, the documentary accepts to look at it in a neutral enough and human enough way that you can get more than this normie view from it. And I find it absolutely beautiful. So he goes to meet the 13-year-old. He's at the top of his celebrity. He has $120,000 in his bank account. If you ever have 120,000 US dollar in your bank account, there should be no point at which you are, broke in your life. If you're intelligent about these things, like if you have 120K in your bank account, you should be clever about it. You should be investing, and there should be no point at the future in life where you're even forced to work. Maybe you will work because you like it. Maybe you will work because there are times where you want to keep your investment going. But here we have a totally different guy, which is, no, 120K, he's going to burn through it. And he's there, 4 million subscriber, peak of the YouTube fame. He has 120K, he has a house, and yet he can't get pussy. So that's the despair. He said, I need excitement. I have no pussy. I'm at the top of my career. Yet I'm just alone in a pricey house. So this is exploitation of a man's weaknesses. The man wants something to happen, and the pedo poachers just send him exactly what they do, so in a way that violates the legal practice of pedo poaching, because pedo poaching only works if you pose as a victim and the man approaches you. But if you go into the DM of the man and you start teasing him, that is entrapment. That is why this evidence, as laid out by Chris Hansen in the documentary, it cannot be valid in a court of law. You cannot cause the crime. You have to wait for the crime to kind of happen. And this is at the limit of acceptability, what they've been doing, and it's outside of the limit of acceptability of courts. And I would say it's starting to be time that, as a public opinion discussion on pedo hunting, we need to start talking about how the spectacle of canceling men for crimes that haven't happened is very, very dangerous and very bad. The documentary doesn't go as far as framing him as a victim, but at least it gives you the out to start thinking that way. I would say this is a victim of, I would say that EDP 445 is a victim of a spectacle industry that has gone wrong. Now, as he goes to meet the 13-year-old, the supposed 13-year-old, which doesn't exist, he imagines he sees a vision of his mother smoking in the car because she always smoked very hard. And so he gets this kind of memory of sensation. And Mike Klum is beautiful here. Another layer of mythology, the mother looking over you. But see, she's not like Ellen of Troy, the mother. She's not the most beautiful woman of the Aegean Sea. She's just the fat black woman smoking smoking her lungs out to death. But there she is as a mythical entity showing in the car, looking over him and telling him, don't do this, don't go see the 13-year-old. This is where a documentary becomes mythology, and no one understands this in 2026 except Mike Klum. So he says, I got there, but nothing fucking happens. Well, of course, nothing happened. There wasn't a girl. This was all a spectacle from Alex Rosen. So eventually he says, well, he was surprised. The news start going. He appears on the front page of Yahoo News. He gets banned from his various social media accounts. So basically, he gets subjected to cancel culture for having this attempt at connecting with a 13-year-old that wasn't a 13-year-old, it was a trap. There is always some deep patriotism in Mike Klum. You know how he filmed the boogie and you see the waves of fat around his belly. And there's the same thing with this guy. And the documentary puts you onto the fact that basically this guy, there are personalities that will just risk it all. And there are personalities that will just burn themselves risking just for the chance that maybe it's true. And EDP 445 is like that. He is just, you realize that, well, this guy had so little pussy. He had achieved everything. He had the money in the bank, he had the big house, he had the celebrity, but his fans were all a bunch of kids. And he calls them pussy, denying, whatever. He basically couldn't have sex with his fans. And his fans were losers too and couldn't have sex with women. And you're faced with the fact that probabilistically and statistically, this guy is a guy willing to bet whatever, all of his life, on an event that could happen once in a million times. Basically, this guy did not get so much fooled by a pedo hunting system. This guy just decided that there was a chance that there was a real girl there. And he went to meet her, thinking, oh, well, she mentioned cupcakes, so I'm not going to get caught in a pedo hunting thing. So basically, it's kind of, he knew it was wrong. He knew of the potential risk that it was false. But at some point, you have so little pussy at the bottom of society when you're 445 pounds and there will be no one ever interested in you, that you're willing to take that shot of maybe there's a girl there. Maybe I can get sex once in my life. Maybe there's one chance in a million that there's a girl, but there's a chance. This is the culmination of his decision process, effectively. Now, there's beautiful scenes of him being free because the documentary builds this whole contradiction between, hey, everyone calls this guy a pedo. They say they have all the evidence. They have him on film admitting to trying to meet a 13-year-old, but there he is free. And so they bring him to a shooting range, and it's like cowboy music or American music, and he's shooting evidence tablets. There's always these moments in the documentary, you know, these kind of wholesome nature moments. But Mike Klum does a kind of wicked version of it all. And it's beautiful how Mike Klum always takes these standing, well-established forms of the classical documentary, but he does it in a kind of dirty 2026 way. He does it in a way where, okay, this is a outdoor wholesome moment with a guy who's celebrating with guns, shooting in the air, celebrating that he's free and that he's not in jail because Alex Rosen messed up the investigation. This movie is so amazing and so hilarious. So then the big entry. Also sprach Zarathustra. People will recognize this music. Strauss, Also sprach Zarathustra, is what plays as Mike Klum introduces. Well, so we've been asking the police, we've been asking the justice system, the district attorney. No one wants to comment on why this guy isn't in jail. The music starts, and then Chris Hansen The original pedo poacher just rises as a superhero. And again, you're so deep in the mythology here. So a villain has been fucking up the minds of the world, basically. How is he still out there? How does this still work? Why is he not in jail? And the villain is like the Joker in The Dark Knight. And we're very much in the Christopher Nolan style of setup here. The villain has been getting away with it, apparently. But Chris Hansen, the hero with the correct credentials, the honorable behavior, this guy is going to appear and tell us what's happening. That is so beautifully done. So basically, Chris Hansen first does an interview with EDP 445 and then reveals the technicalities and why it didn't work. So the 13-year-old was not a true 13-year-old first, and it's a decoy that has initiated the conversation with him. So when you initiate the conversation, you are creating a situation of entrapment. And this will not pass in prosecutions because you are effectively creating the crime yourself. This crime wouldn't have happened, and yet you are there making it up. When you are standing and not approaching the pedo, and the pedo approaches you actively, then it becomes usable as evidence in court, because then you're really catching events that would have happened. Like, you could have been a real girl, and you could have been the victim of this approach. So that is effectively the rule that Chris Hansen lays out, and that explains why EDP 445 is not in jail. And I believe it's very important because these pedo poachers, they are violating this rule constantly. That's because they are after the spectacle. They don't really care about whether the guy gets in jail. They want this moment so they can get views and clicks and super chats. And EDP 445 looks kind of good in this moment. First, the confrontation between Chris Hansen and EDP 445 is absolutely beautiful. Hero, villain, straight, honorable, shameless. The opposition is absolutely magical. And Chris Hansen is kind of put on the back. He's kind of shocked in a way that he doesn't seem emotionally or personally shocked. But you can see that this interaction has brought Chris Hansen somewhere else. Because the classical guy that gets caught and victimized by Chris Hansen through his show, his usual Dateline show, Catch a Predator. This guy is disconcerted. He wants to apologize. He's like, sorry. Oh my God, I wish I didn't do this. Oh, I'm in trouble. But here we have an EDP 445 who has endorsed the villain power, and he's just responding to Chris Hansen. And it's fascinating to see the classical lines of Chris Hansen being addressed by a shameless villain who says, oh yeah, I was there to have sex, yeah. Because normally they always try to get away with it, and it's the getting away that gives the magic of the classical Chris Hansen content. But with EDP, you have a villain that has endorsed evil. I don't care. Yes, I was there to get sex. What do you think? And just this, it's not so much that you want to side with the EDP on this, but you want to find it beautiful that, wow, I've never seen Chris Hansen have his questions addressed so honestly. And then the movie makes you realize, wow, there's some kind of superpower to being an assumed villain. There's a kind of superpower in saying, yeah, I'm evil. I don't care. I'm still useful to the world. I still will claim my little piece of it. Damon Knight says men no longer are invested in purity in modern society anymore. But I think purity is gone a long time, and this movie is bringing you down into the toilet. And at the end, the whole toilet metaphor will be literal. We'll get there. So then the story opens on the Kayla story. So there would be two victims. There's this 13-year-old who never existed, so a decoy invented by Alex Rosen. Okay, so no crime committed, and the evidence is botched, so not usable in prosecution. And then there's the story of Kayla. Now, Kayla is a 15-year-old looking for fame who's hanging out in the Discord circles of a YouTuber called Gideon, and who's allied with a YouTuber called Skeeter Jean, who are like sickly rich YouTubers coming in their big cars and acting big, but who are effectively copycats of Chris Hansen, and they're trying to do this whole pedo poaching spectacle. Now, there are two black guys. Kayla is a white girl, and there is something that happens here in this triangle, which sends Kayla. Well, first, it sends EDP to contact Kayla as just someone on Discord, but eventually it builds a Kayla becoming a unwilling or they claim that it wasn't planned that she would become a decoy or that they wouldn't want to use her as sending sexual signals. But there's something very unhealthy here that the documentary doesn't fully expose. But here's a 15-year-old that is basically being used as a decoy for sexual abuse. And the traditional pedo pouching is generally done with the adult decoy so that she can consent. They take a woman who's 18 but who looks young enough to make it, and that's usually what the traditional system does. Now with Kayla, we're in a totally different realm. She's being groomed by Gideon and Skeeter Jean to continue the contact with him with EDP 445. She's turning him on with boob pics. She is looking for celebrity, and at some point she will even betray the pedo pouchers themselves. Here is an absolute mythological creature of female evil. Kayla is this kind of siren or Medusa, just absolute evil coming in, willing to mess with the whole thing. And I don't know to which extent she approached EDP, he approached her. She says he approached her first because she joined the Discord, but with all of our discourse, what I can detect in this interview with her is that she is extremely non-agentic. She says, oh, well, I was just there, on the Discord because I was invited there. I didn't really want to be there. I didn't really want to talk to EDP. I didn't really want to do what Gideon was telling me to do, but I did it. The I didn't want, that is to me a sign that something evil is happening with this girl. Now, you can have evil intent even if you're 15, by the way. Of course, as EDP phrases it himself in the documentary, it is irresponsible and criminal for the adult to abuse or to contact sexually a 15-year-old. But that doesn't mean that the 15-year-old doesn't have intent, and they do. And Kayla seems way too, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do any of this. When in fact, when you learn about the actual conversation, she did send big, boob pics. She did send teasing pictures with her face edited on it that she was recruiting from porn sites. So she was taking these porn pictures so that she doesn't have to send a pic of herself. She would put her face added to the picture with AI or Photoshop, and then she would send them to EDP. Well, then you have a guy who's being teased by a woman who's about to become legal. So it's like even this whole segment is not satisfying me, that we're dealing here with a predator who would have hurt someone in the absence of the pedo pouching industry. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem because he gets framed by a fake 13-year-old. He gets then framed and teased eternally by a 15-year-old, to which he's careful enough to say, we're going to wait that you be capable of consenting. So I find the whole case against EDP very weak. That's why it doesn't end up in a criminal prosecution. Now, the documentary does reveal things that would be prosecutable. If he did send his dick pics to an actual 15-year-old, perhaps, interstate communications and indecency, perhaps there's something they could get there. If he did threaten, he threatened to kill Kayla and said, since you're getting me in all this trouble, I will have to kill you. That would be death threat, and that would be prosecutable, probably much more easier than the whole pedo pouching angle. So there are definitely crimes and apparent attempts at crimes in this documentary. But I don't know that I want to judge a man who's been framed into such a organized system that effectively I'm asking myself the question at the end of this documentary, would this guy have committed any crime in his life if it wasn't of these fucking spectacle-seeking clowns? And I don't have an answer to this, but I tend toward probably not. This guy seems to be like cool, chill, not trying to force himself. So you're dealing with fictitious victims here. We are in the world of zero victim crimes. That's a problem. Then he says, you know why I'm not in jail? Because I'm protected by God. And you have Gideon, the YouTuber who tried to poach him with Kayla. He said that is not God protecting him, that is the devil. And here Mike Klum, Absolute Art, does a transition from grace, God protection to now EDP starts coughing. You know you're faced with a great artist when he can take an interview in which you happen to have coughed for a minute, and he turns it into a whole mythological progression where the coughing of EDP now feels like the devil. It's so intentional. It's so beautiful. The music sets in, and now you are left with, well, is the devil now entering EDP? And I would say the documentary suggests a reversal view of this too. To me, Gideon is very much a devil. I mean, here's a guy grooming a 15-year-old to actually be sexually victimized by something that he wants to do a spectacle out of. To me, I'm not sure about the absolute evilness of EDP at the outset of this documentary. I am absolutely certain about the evil of Gideon. Because here's a guy who wants to look good. He wants to look moral, and hey, I'm pouching pedos. Isn't that good? All pedos are bad, right? But here's a guy who wants to benefit from this honorable public view of himself, but at the same time is willing to create an actual victim, a 15-year-old Kayla, and manipulate her and groom her into having herself intentionally victimized. So basically, that's a guy saying, you know what, the pedo pouching decoys, they don't work good enough. Let me take an actual child and victimize her for real. I'm going to send her. And of course, he does it subtly. He doesn't instruct her because that would be criminal. But he develops a friendship with her in a way that makes me believe this is basically an evil act of exploitation of a child for the purpose of YouTube spectacle and for the purpose of furthering cancel culture. Now, Kayla has her own wrongs, in my view, but she has wrongs as a child, as someone who's, of course, going to exploit any monkey branches that she can climb on. But Gideon is an adult and a YouTuber of spectacle, and he's definitely the most evil figure in this whole thing, including Skeeter Jean, this whole partner of his. These guys are clowns, and in fact, Chris Hansen comes in the documentary to say they are clowns. But when Mike Klum does this whole reversal between God and the devil, and EDP starting to cough, that to me is absolutely beautiful, and it's a two-way suggestion by the documentary that everyone wants EDP to be infected by the devil, to die of his own shit, basically. But down the line, we are faced with a witch hunt here, and the devils may be the ones who claim that the devil is going after you. The devils might be on the other side. There's a montage about the health issues of EDP, and then the documentary goes into extremely deep pathetism. So he's on dialysis, he's in total renal failure. He can't get a renal transplant because he's too fat, and the health system will not transplant you with a kidney if you're that fat, because, well, I guess there's priority list, and there's the fact that you're going to die anyway at this weight. So now you enter the problem that EDP is really at the end of the candle of life. He has to go twice a week to a center that completely changes his blood for dialysis blood because he wouldn't survive. His kidneys are unable to keep him going. So a machine is sucking out his blood, doing the thing that kidneys normally do, and then sending it back in. That is what dialysis is, and it's a time bomb on your life. You're gonna die. The documentary says the average life expectancy for someone with that severe of a kidney failure is 5 years. He's been having it for 4. So this guy is about to die. And yet there he is, continuing to be the villain to the extent he can. There's the professor moment, which is very cute, because here Mike Klum shows you, we've been talking about all this grave stuff, but here we have an entertainer, EDP445, and we can get him to do a little spectacle. And it's funny, because he dresses as a professor, and he points on the board, and he says, "Here are the bitches of YouTube." And this is Aiden Ross, some of the hoes of YouTube, like Pokemon, XQC, Oompaville, Ethan Klein. They're all the bitches, the people that dropped him under the bus, the people that lied. They're all this little circle of socially reinforced normie cultural rejection. And you realize, okay, so that's the system that went after him. Well, this very system went after me many times, tried to destroy my life many times. So I know that this system is that evil. I know that this system can make up stuff. And here they have made up stuff. They've made up a false victim. They've then made up a kind of decoy 15-year-old borderline trying to tease him. At some point, you have to ask yourself, in face of this documentary, what does this improve the world anymore? Is there a point at which pedo poachers cause more harm than they resolve? Because I have no doubt that Chris Hansen and his classic work was catching real pedos. But with these pedo hunters, these clowns, as Chris Hansen calls them, and they are clowns, I'm wondering whether they cause more damage, because Kayla has been victimized only to the extent that Gideon wanted to, only to the extent that she wanted to, by sending those teasing pictures to EDP. And if Kayla was to send me, as a 42-year-old, a man who's been reproducing a lot in my life, if Kayla was to send me nude pics, I would tell her, I can't have sex with you. I can't receive those messages right now. But if you want, we can have sex when you're 16. That is what any man should do. Any man who's single. Then EDP comes out with the reels of the internet. Andrew Tate and his brother, Sneeko, Ben Shapiro, Trump, Rogan, Fresh and Fit, and Pearl Davis. It's fascinating. Fascinating of a mix. These four kind of poorly political, not too political YouTubers, they are kind of victimized in their content consumption, and they're being drawn toward normie thought by the likes of Trump, Rogan, Ben Shapiro. But it's interesting to see that a guy who assumes the role of the villain is down the line a very normie guy. Very normie guy. JCX says normie cultural rejection is a symptom of being an individual amongst sheep. Yes. I love how this movie shows you basically you have a group of sheep here. And at the end of the documentary, they all have their say. Christian is there. Boogie2988 is there calling EDP a mental retard. And it's like, wait a minute. Well, Boogie, is not in a position to do much life advice. But there he is at the end of the documentary. It's so beautiful to see this collection of bizarroids at the end of the movie. And again, it's all the genius of Mike Klum, because those were just small interviews where they say a single sentence or two about EDP. But it gives you the whole range of the bizarreness of the YouTube community. It's like, how does Christian has an opinion on this? And we have Boogie2988 who's calling him a retard, and all of his haters who are making a business out of basically being normal. They're all making a business out of being normal. But in a mythology, in a complex mythology, in a Homeric kind of mythology, you have all these bizarroids coming out of the ground. And Mike Klum makes them come out of the ground beautifully. The end is there's always a resolution or rescue in a documentary, and Mike Klum does the rescue starting with there's three movements there. There's a new girlfriend, and this is so pathetic and hilarious. She's a super fat girlfriend. She seems to be simple-minded, and she's just like. No, my EDP that I know would not contact a 13-year-old. So she chooses to kind of look away from all this story. But she is there, and they're there for a year together, and she never gives him sex. But she's like 600 pounds, and he's like 500 pounds. Even if there was some kind of willingness for sex, it would be like physically almost impossible. He would probably be fucking a hole in her belly. He probably would be fucking between two fat drippings. But this is Mike Klum captures it all. And then you have him desperate in a bed saying, you know what? Now I've got my girlfriend for a whole year and I still don't have pussy. And you're like, wow, there is no solution to this shit. Death is the way nature normally handles this. But this guy is just being kept alive by dialysis. This movie like really throws you on those lines of thought where it's like, wouldn't it be better if we didn't have dialysis? Because the fact is, okay, dialysis will allow you to outrun death for a while, but you're not going to be selected by a fit woman. You're just a loser who's dependent on the health system to even continue living on the everyday. Man. So the girlfriend doesn't work, and he drops her, and he says a couple of like lightly misogynist things that are kind of cute. Like, he's pissed because there he is at the end of his life, having achieved finally a girlfriend as an adult who's not a child, who could technically consent to sex, but she's telling him, I'm not gonna have sex with you. And it's like constantly grasping. And the music is like that too. It's like this vervolting classical orchestra music that kind of always escapes. Happiness always escapes this guy. There are men who are born to be the shit of the world. And what this movie ultimately tells you is that there are two ways we can see it. We could see it as, well, they go to war, they die, they are sacrificed as heroes or villains of the war. That's normally what the traditionalist system would have done. There's surplus male, and they're gonna be treated as shit, and they are shit, and they will always be slaves to whoever shows up around them. But what this movie is telling you is actually the modern world is probably more cruel to these guys than the old world that was sending them to die under the cannons. The modern world is making a spectacle out of them, and it's reducing them into just an item of circus, attention-seeking items that are to be disposed, completely left to their own. Kayla wants to escalate this. Kayla wants to elevate herself as, because she has a singing career. So, hey, I'm going to be the victim of EDP. I'm going to help these guys catch this pedo. And here, you don't even have a pedo. That's that's the problem. And Mike Klum adds to the discomfort by having him interact with kids. So he brings a kid and he writes on the documentary, this happened under parental supervision. So don't worry. The parent of the kid was there. And then it's like, okay, they're chilling on the bed with the kid. And it's like, on the one hand, society wants you to call him a pedo. But there still hasn't been a single pedo act ever committed by this guy. Unless you want to take the communications, but communications made under belief. Communications not even made to an actual child. And then, so he drops his girlfriend, and then he switches to the AI girlfriend. And the saddest moments, bro. He says the AI girlfriend was the most beautiful thing he had in his life. And I want to believe it after I've seen his life, after this documentary. Yes, it would seem, given how this guy was just raped by the world, left for dead, double-crossed by everyone and everything around him. How he was left as a shit stain on the border of the streets of modernity. I can absolutely imagine that the fatty Asian girlfriend that he concocted in the virtual world was the best thing to happen to his life. And you have this whole Christopher Nolan energy, how in was it Christopher Nolan? No, it's in the movie The Joker. So in the movie The Joker, the imaginary girlfriend of the Joker is in apartment B. She's a B choice. She's a lesser choice. Even the dreams are lesser when you are in absolute pathetism. And here the AI girlfriend is she's fat. And I'm like, wow, there is this bottom of the world where even your aspirations are imperfect. There is this bottom of the world where, because it's like, okay, I can deal with the fact that when you get an actual girlfriend, she's going to come with imperfections and you're going to love her because you're doing a project together. But at least if you're going to have an AI girlfriend, you would expect her to be a 10 out of 10. But no, AI there's part of a realism thing to it where this guy knows he wouldn't have a 10 out of 10 girlfriend. So his AI girlfriend is actually a fat Asian. It's shocking. And then the movie brings you deeper. there's these moments in these movies that I would call the documentarist's problem. And it's when the documentarist starts filming himself in a situation of disconcert. How will we finish this documentary? How can we make it work? And Mike Lum does a scene like this. And you ultimately, normally in traditional documentaries, you'll see people, a documentarist with a board, trying to brainstorm, how will we deal with this? Oh my God, we have this situation that's keeping the documentary from happening. Mike Lum recycles this style, but makes an absolute joke out of it. And it's like, the problem is that EDP keeps sending his shit pics to the documentarist, Mike Lum. So throughout the filming of this piece of art over 2 years, Mike Klum is receiving the feces pictures of EDP, who was so little inhibition that he's sharing willfully the contents of his toilet to Mike Klum. And then you have Mike Klum in front of all the printed pictures of shit, and he's like, what the fuck are we doing? The comedy is so powerful because there's always this fake moment in the documentary where the documentarist is like, oh shit, how can that happen? We cannot get the filming location. He's refusing to film. Let's try to convince him. But here the problem of this documentary is the constant receiving of shit pictures from EDP. And it just brings you into that, wow, I've entered a world of bizarroids and broken people that are so much at the bottom that they have so much disinhibition because down the line they're matter that's already dead. You're listening to a man that's already dead in EDP. He's been left for dead by society. He's been left for dead by any girlfriends he may have had. He's been left for dead by everyone. And therefore, he's just a piece of matter trying to play his villain role down to the tomb. And it's so beautiful as a life cycle. It's a mythology that you wouldn't have in a classical text of mythology. Because in a classical text, you always have to have some kind of rescuing value. Whereas EDP doesn't have much of a rescuing value other than I'm the villain, I assume it, and I come here to fuck your shit up. And ultimately, the whole metaphor of shit that's going down the swirl of the toilet, that is like life. That is what is happening to turds like EDP 445. Mike Klum finishes on the creep finally. The Creep by Radiohead, but sung by a chorus of in a cappella singing, bro. This is one of the most beautiful songs in the world. And the way it is sung, it's actually more beautiful than Radiohead. Absolute genius ending. Same song was used in the Boogie 2988 documentary. When you were here before, look me in the eye. You're just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry. You float like a feather in a beautiful world. I wish I was special. You're so fucking special. But I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't belong here. That is the ending of EDP 445 on the backgrounds of the normie YouTubers coming out. Adam 22, Charles White Jr., Keemstar, all being the little rats of uniformity and conformism, these little sheeps. And yet the documentary doesn't fully abandon EDP 445 to the judgments of the witch hunt, because they give him, Mike Klum gives him, a finally worth of this name, as the Eagles, the football team that he's a fan of since he's a child, finally wins a Super Bowl. And you can see EDP alone in his crappy bedroom with only a bed laying on the floor, a mattress on the floor without any sort of furniture. Just EDP celebrating on TV the win of his Eagles football team. And that gives it gives a release, it gives a rescue, and it tells you, down the line, this guy has been isolated into a bubble, but that bubble, there can still be some little happiness to it before his death. There can still be some redemption there. He will never have pussy, but he can be there. He can shine in his villain desires to be an assumed endorser of his own actions, to be a troublemaker for the world. He can do it, and he can win in his own ways inside that isolated bubble that no other humans really experience or enter. But you've kind of had a glimpse. This movie, you kind of have a glimpse of it. And this movie made me cry. It made me cry about basically a criminal and a guy who definitely is engaged in some degree of abuse of victims that he at least imagined. It is a beautiful, beautiful movie. I recommend everyone watch it. And it ends with "Wah! Down with the Sickness" by Disturbed, and the moving of Mike Klum's head, telling you this comes from the mind of Mike Klum. This mythology right here has to emerge in the mind of the documentarist. He has to understand reality, and he has to reconstitute it. It's the same thing in cooking. You have to understand the meat, the chicken, the pork, the beef. You have to understand it. You have to kind of destroy parts of it in cooking, heating, rendering, and then you have to reconstitute it on a plate for the final destruction to happen by the taster. And Mike Klum did exactly this with the real story of EDP 445. It's not easy because you get these interviews, it's just a fat guy on a chair saying stuff. But you can create a mythology, you can use AI, you can use story making techniques, you can use montage, editing, cutscenes, and you end up making something great from it. Much love. I'm going to sleep. What a documentary. Holy shit.